Hello, hello, hello. Aurelia Davis, the educator's educator, coming to you this another day. And I hope everyone's doing well. No teachers. I know you're still in classes. Maybe some of you have even started those half-day regiments where you do professional development. The children are there only a half a day. Well, if you are, that's good for you. It's a time to rest and to readjust yourself, readjust your schedule. And also, we have this long weekend holiday coming up, which is another way for you to just sort of readjust yourself or just to rethink things that have been happening for the last couple of weeks. Well, if this is your first time seeing me, my name is Aurelia Davis, the educator's educator. I am a retired teacher from Chicago Public Schools. I taught over 31 years and just had a lot of experience teaching and working with individual teachers or working with teachers through student teaching, through a mentorship program that Chicago Public Schools developed, and then going back and getting my master's in teacher leadership because I just enjoyed sharing what I had learned as a teacher with other teachers, and it worked out real well. And then after retirement, I also worked with another university who was doing what they call it. What do you call it? They were doing the Teach for America. That's it. Teach for America. And during that program, basically what was happening is that these were teachers, young people who had already got a bachelor's degree in one particular area, but they wanted to go back they wanted to go back and get a master's degree in education. And so they were doing teaching and taking classes at the same time, simultaneously. And they needed a lot of leadership in the classroom because some of them had never been in a classroom before. And so by them taking the classes on methods and classroom management and those things, that allowed them to do a little, to go into the classroom, but at the same time, they needed that individual with some experience, which was me, to go into that classroom and just sort of shadow them and see give them suggestions on how to do things and so on and so forth. And that worked out real well. Eventually, I ended up mentoring Teach for America students. I had about 22 before the program itself ended. But anyway, last couple of days, I've been talking about lesson plans. Like I said before, a good lesson drives your classroom. A good lesson gives your students what they need in order to be more productive as far as learning is concerned. So you're teaching them something. You're teaching them something that they may not know. You may be teaching them something that they do know. But for you to be able to expand that information in reading, science, social studies, or math is a very good situation. It's very good for children. So today my topic was how effective lesson plans can improve classroom management. Well, I am a component for classroom management. I am a champion for classroom management. I taught so many years, and then I found out that I was not being effective with my lessons because my classroom management was all over the place. And when I say all over the place, it was all over the place. Every morning we were doing something different. And so I hadn't trained my students or had taught my students what the classroom looks like the first thing in the morning and what they're supposed to do first and second and third and fourth. And if your morning goes well, everything else is going to go well. That's another thing that I found out. So what I found myself doing is adjusting my lessons. Now, I'm going to just be honest. Back in the day, teachers, a lot of veteran teachers, we started out with reading in the morning. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how we got into that on that train, but that's what we did. I'm assuming that we felt that the children were were more relaxed in the morning. And so because they were more relaxed in the morning, then they could easily involve themselves in reading or writing and that type of thing. So we kept those particular lessons or those particular subjects in the morning. And then, of course, we did more active subjects like science and math and social studies in the afternoon. But after a while, I found that my children sort of changed changed on me. They became, some of them on certain days, okay, they would come in active. I would say by like the middle of the week, they seemed to have gotten this extra burst of energy and they would come in there and they were active and whatever. So I had to find myself adjusting my lesson plans. So even if that lesson plan stated reading all the way across the morning from like maybe about 9 o'clock to 10:30, I found myself redoing that to the point where I brought math in the morning, and it was interesting because the children looked at me like I had lost my mind. Davis, why are we doing math? We haven't had reading yet. I said, well, are you interested in doing some math? I said, I have some exciting math to do this morning. And we can easily get back to our reading this afternoon. And so they did it. So like I've said all the time, for the whole run of this, what I'm doing now and what I'm giving you for the last couple of days for lessons, as far as lesson plans is concerned, lesson plans are used as a guide. Use your lesson plans as a guide. That's what I'm trying to say. Use your lesson plans as a guide. What you have written down and what you actually do may be totally different. What you have written down, what you actually do, I'll say it again, may be totally different. Of course, you have your objectives that are basically coming from Common Core or coming from your particular district as to what you want the children to learn, and that stays in place. That stays in place. And before, what makes it more important is that you're going to get them to learn this particular objective or to practice this particular objective by any means necessary. So, dance and song or play through a map, any kind of way you want them to learn this particular objective is up to you in order to get it across. So that's why your lesson plans are a guide. Your objectives basically drive you as to what you need to do and what you're supposed to do. But at the same time, the how you get to that particular objective is basically what you have to practice. And I'm going to just tell you, I have never did the same lesson twice. I have never did the same lesson each time the same. Okay. In other words, I did it one time. The first time I did it, it was one way, and then the second time I introduced it, it was a whole different way. So I use whatever, and it usually comes down to me sort of rethinking things as to what got the children engaged and what had got the children involved in what I was trying to teach and tell them. So that was basically how I use my lessons. And then another thing, you cannot find yourself to be so driven to get every lesson in that book for the week done. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, especially if the lessons are steps where you have to teach things in steps and whatever. You can't jump over one in order to get to five. You're going to have to get 1, 2, and 3, and 4 in there some kind of way. So if you do not get to a particular lesson one week, push it on to the next week. Push it on to the next week. And I had to tell my administrators, because at one time I was questioned. I was questioned as to, I'm like, One time I was questioned, my administrators questioned me and said, really, you have this lesson in here about 3 or 4 times? I said, well, they haven't gotten it yet. They have not gotten it in order, so well that where I can move on. So I need to teach it again. And then sometimes what I would do is I would present it in a different way. I could easily take a lesson and present it through math. I could easily take a lesson and present it through social studies. I would sometimes take a lesson and present it through reading, or I present it through science. Or the arts, or music and whatever. So I took a particular objective and took it to the level where the children would understand what was going on, but at the same time, I would give it to them differently. The first time I gave it to them would be one way. And then the second or third time I would give it to them, I would do it differently. So that's what ended up showing up on my lesson plan book as to the same objective, but how I taught the lesson differently. So those are things that you need to do. And like I said before, getting back to the classroom management piece, you have to sort of recognize the mood your students are in. Recognize the mood your students are in. And it's funny because In Chicago, we have two seasons. We have spring and we have winter. Okay, skip summer and all that other. We have summer. No, we have summer and winter. We don't have spring and fall. But I found that my students were basically sometimes the weather affected them. It, I'm saying it. I found that the weather affected them. It not only affected them, it affected me. So if we came in to school on a very, very rainy day, it sort of set a mood of calm because the children were busy listening to the rainfall, the raindrops outside and so forth. It was calming and whatever. So I may start that morning out with a writing lesson. What does those raindrops remind you of? What are those raindrops? Hearing those raindrops, what do they remind you of? If you were able to draw something in the clouds, what would you draw? So the transition is basically me being able to just be creative throughout the day for my students to learn was very important to me, because if I did not get them to the level of creativity so that they basically almost taught themselves to a certain extent, anything I had down in my book wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. So I said that to say this, that if at this particular time you're finding you, and especially coming up into Labor Day weekend, take the time to reassess what you did. If you're in school, some schools are still not starting until after Labor Day. But if you have been teaching up to this particular point, you've been in school for like about 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever like that, this is the time to assess what you have been able to do. This is the time to assess what you've been doing, and at the same time grade what you have been doing. Did it work? Didn't it work? So on and so forth. What should I be doing different? How are my students in the morning? How are they in the afternoon? How are they doing by the end of the day? What's their attitudes? What's their moods and whatever? Should I be a little lighter on some days than other days? I found out by Friday, my students were basically tired. They were tired of lessons and everything. So I would always try to create and have something fun for them to do on a Friday afternoon. That's been going on for years and years, puzzles and games and things like that. It will not hurt them. We don't want a drudge step by step classroom. You don't want that for any students. I don't care if they're in preschool or high school. You have to keep it. They work in the light. And when I say they work in the light, that means they keep it light all the way across. They don't get too serious about anything. So you have to slip that education part in there as easily as possible. You have to sort of be careful how you're introducing those things to them. And so, like I said before, this is the weekend. Take the weekend. Take a couple of days just to relax and debrief and just de-stress yourselves, if that's such a word. De-stress. I would take my holidays very seriously, where I would try not to take anything home. Seriously, I tried, because that would not be a holiday for me. And if I did want to take anything home, it would be the minimalist, because I was interested in how the children responded to a particular lesson. So take this time to just sort of rethink how your last 2 weeks have gone. What would you do differently to get different results? What would you add to your lesson plans? What would you take away from your lesson plans? How would you change you present them? Would you change as to how much context is in one particular lesson? Are you trying to push them to learn too much at one time? Sometimes lessons or objectives have to be broken up into different parts. That also helps. They have to be broken up into different parts. So you can't just push everything into them, just like you open up their mouths and pushing it in. You can't do that. You can't do that. It's not going to work. It never will work. So it's the type of thing where you have to take this time to just reevaluate. And there's nothing wrong with you. Just like you evaluate your students, you need to evaluate yourself as teachers. You are your own critic. You be your own critic instead of someone else telling you what you did wrong. Criticize yourself or evaluate yourself. Could I have did that better? Was I clear enough when I taught that particular lesson? Did I have every child's attention? What about my children that are a little slower than the others? Did they understand what was happening? And like I said before, lessons are not where you take them and talk at children, you talk to children, and you involve them in the lessons that you're teaching throughout the day. That will help them also. And so at the same time, just debrief and reflect and write some things down. And then when you go back next week or the following week, just sort of monitor yourself as to how you do things and how you open up a lesson. Monitor yourself as to how you get the children involved in those types of things. And like I said before, the lesson plan is a guide, but you can always put those little sticky notes on the side. And if they work, then add a little pink note or write something in blue or pink or purple or something. Said this worked with this particular group, or this worked with this particular lesson, because that helps all the time also. So, said enough. I was glad to be with you today. If if you want help with your lesson plans, I have a new service that I'm offering called Lesson Plan Audits. And what you would do is you would go to my website, aureliadavis.com, and leave me a note so that I could call you back, or leave me a note or a memo or something like that, post a note, something in my website so that I know that you need help, and I'll get back to you ASAP. ASAP. Let me tell you something. It is good that whatever you're feeling now and whatever failures you may be having now, that they're quick. Sometimes it's a quick fix. It's a quick fix, and you can get it fixed to the point where you start moving toward a particular direction. As an educator, my first 2 years were just all over the place. I was scatterbound and scatterbrained and everything. But then I started to picking out things that worked in my classroom with my students. And it worked because the third grader that I left, that I had 1 year, was basically the same third grader that I had the next year, even though it was a totally different class. But that particular age group drew toward different things that worked with them. And so I was able to use that. So leave me a note. Go to aureliadavis.com. I'd love to talk to you. Keep teaching. Teachers, it's a long holiday weekend coming up. Get some rest and keep teaching. Take care.